Hey guys, Pretzelman945 here. Welcome back to another video. I am back with another, as promised, updated version of a previous list that I did for the first time last year. Um, that is my top 10 dynamic in fiction. Um, Now, what I'm talking about here is the specific relationship or dynamic which two characters have in a story. Um, Character dynamics are one of my favorite aspects of a story because the relationship, especially between a hero and a villain or something like that, can really influence the way the plot goes and make and just like there are many stories that I've consumed where, as is evidenced by this list, the core of the story is built around the dynamic of two characters, and I love when stories are built that way because I think it makes for fantastic storytelling. So let's kick off the list with number 10, Revan and Emperor Vitiate, from SWOTR specifically, because Vitiate doesn't make an appearance in KOTOR. So this one is unique because um until you play SWOTR, you don't find out that the reason that Revan and Malik are turned to the dark side, at least in terms of like official Legends lore, is because they were turned by Emperor Vitiate when they went to the Unknown Regions, discovered Dromund Ka, and were essentially lured in, but it wasn't fully successful because they were able to break free of his control, but still remained loyal to the dark side. So, um, well, what that results in is this amazing storyline in SWOTR, where Revan, I don't remember exactly how it happens, but uh, a thing happens where Revan's goal splits, so like there's a light side and a dark side version of him, and uh oh, yes, I remember now. So in the Revan novel, uh, he um, uh, he goes to fight Vitiate, fails, but um, he manages to like maintain a mental influence on Vitiate, for 300 years, which prevents Vitiate from going on an all-out war like he'd originally planned to against the Republic. Um, And then, what else happens? But him doing this for so long is what causes this eventual personality split, and it causes the dark side version of Revan to try and resurrect the ancient spirit of Vitiate. And and I think that all those combined elements make for a fantastic dynamic between the two characters. Um, and number 9 is Cloud and Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII. Um, these two are very interesting because they are both the same kind of character. They are both ex-soldiers. Or people that used to be soldiers for Shinra that are not anymore. Um, and and the way in which Sephiroth just I talked about this when I mentioned him on my villains list, but like the way that Sephiroth just kind of is mentally present in almost every part of Cloud's character. Um, and like um and like the way that that fundamentally affects the way that Cloud developed is just fascinating to look at. And it makes like this interesting conflict within Cloud as a protagonist. Um, but I'm gonna make the protagonist's video next. By the way, I haven't made that list yet, but I'm making that video next. Cloud is definitely gonna be on that list for sure. Um, but like the way that this creates this interesting conflict of him like becoming a more caring person versus seeming to slowly lose his humanity because of the impacts of Sephiroth's influence and the way that those like conflict with each other is just really really interesting. Um and number 8 is Kenji and Friend from 20th Century Boys. Um, what I love about this dynamic is the fact that um it you know comparatively it's normally the villain that seems to affect the protagonist more, but this is a unique case where Kenji um being just alive in general affects Friend more, which is case of the protagonist affecting the villain in a dynamic is a lot rarer and more unique generally, and that's what I quite like about this one. Um, is that like throughout the entirety of the story, even when Kenji is not there for the majority of it, like just things like his very name, his like presence, him being mentioned, like just thoughts about him and like the way that he might be impacting um friends' efforts to like control the world um is just uh it's fascinating because it shows such a depth of Friend as a character to me. Um, because it shows these two completely different sides to his personality. Um, which just gives him a lot more depth as a character when all the while, like until he shows up again as an adult, like uh Kenji was actually alive the entire time. He never died. He just suffered from amnesia. Um, and like this compounded with the further reveals of who both of the friends are, just like connects everything together, like everything does with 20th Century Boys. The story like just brilliantly connects together. This is another example of that, where like both versions of Friend, the two people that like go under the mask as Friend, um, the both of them having their reaction to Kenji the way they do, um, is so perfectly explained by um by like revealing who they are and their relationship to Kenji based on who they actually were. At number 7 is Reinhard and Yang Wenli from Legend of the Galactic Heroes. This is obviously the most recent addition into the list here. Um but what I think is most impressive about this and um is that these characters only meet one time in the entire show. And that meeting is incredible. It's probably one of the best scenes in the entire show to me. Um, but like that's not even where the best parts of their dynamic come from. The best parts of their dynamic come from the way that each of them relate to the themes um of the natural course of history, that is portrayed so excellently in this show that I uh lauded on and on about in my review of it. Um, where um where they kind of represent the two different perspectives of history, where Reinhard is this idea of pushing ahead and making decisions for the future, while having to be pulled down into the present, whereas Yang is like this idea of being stuck in the present and not wanting to have to worry about the future and how that would impact the past. And this conflicting relationship and like between their two philosophies, and like how that adds further layers to the ideas of um uh how that adds like more depth to their pretty superficial conflict of ideals between like autocracy and republicanism, is just really interesting. And like the way that Yang dies is extremely symbolic of this idea, where he is the where he would be known as a significant character to history, but he would not get a chance to die that way. Whereas Reinhard was intentionally trying to do that, and as a result, he died as several great conquerors did, um, by just sickness, and not have and neither of them died actually having this epic clash on the battlefield. Um, And number six is Akira and Ryuo from Devilman Crybaby. Now, this anime is very underrated to me. Um, I absolutely love Devilman Crybaby. I highly recommend it if you have not seen it. Um, in my opinion, the most defining feature of um of this anime is the dynamic between these two, because like the way that they start out as childhood friends, and this eventually transitions into um uh this system of how would I describe this? It's like the way that this literally transforms from childhood friends to literally God and devil, or person attempting to be God, which who is actually the devil, and the hero who is portrayed as the devil, is just fascinating. Um, it's fascinating to me. Like what is so impressive about this dynamic to me is the fact that this anime is literally only 10 episodes long, and yet in such a short span of time, they manage to establish and and create such a ridiculous transformation and journey of the entire state of the world and their dynamic, to where it becomes as extreme of a contrast as it does, and all the while the two have such interesting dialogue to each other. Like it's just incredible, truly. Um, at number five, and this is like the main reason that the old list is outdated, is because number five and four are both from the house in Fata Morgana, which I had not started by the time that I had made that first list back in August of last year. Uh, and looking back on it now, that list is crucially missing both of these. So the number five spot is Jacopo and Morgana. Um, Now look, I'm not the biggest Jacopo fan. I think he's a decent character, but heavily overglazed. I really like Morgana. She was very high on my villains tier list, on my villains not tier list, this villains top 20 list that I made a few days ago. Um, but I think that she's a great character, but also not as good as what people say. However, the aspect of both of these characters that I think deserves to be glazed as much as I've heard it talked about is absolutely the extremely fucked relationship that they have. Um, because Jacopo, like, he starts out in door three, um, just being this absolute piece of shit. Uh, and to the white-haired girl, who we find out is his wife and all this stuff, and he's just an absolute piece of shit to her. And door three ends just very tragically with like, um, Maria almost dead, and Jacopo like, I don't remember how he actually. I don't think he dies at the end of door three. But he's not in a good spot anyway. Um, and and the white haired girl just runs away. We don't know what happens to her at the end of door three. Um, and then we get some more context as to their relationship. When we see Morgana's true backstory in door six. Um, and it like is slowly revealed that like her and Jacopo were like childhood best friends. Jacopo was in love with Morgana, even though there was like an 8-year age difference between the two. um, which hey, that's always fun, right? Um, and then like uh time passes, like Jacopo eventually like overtakes the king, uh who I mean the lord, who Barnier, that's his name. Yes, 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 Barnier. Who overtakes Lord Barnier, and essentially like he tries to do good, but he eventually becomes a second version of Lord Barnier. Um which is like the true tragedy of Jacopo as a character. Um and then like Morgana um ends up before him again, the circumstances of which I'm not going to explain because it would take too long and it's not completely relevant to talking about their entire relationship to between Jacopo and Morgana specifically. Um and then Jacopo brutally abuses her without knowing who she is, and then it ends with his brutal death. And that's the thing that we see in Requiem of Innocence is like the full version of that completed. Um and then but like, the whole point of Door 8 is trying to undo all of these events by going into the past. Um and the way that this effort like fails, and seeing the effect that it has on Jacopo's character in Door 8 is like that was my favorite part of Jacopo's character, was seeing him like supposedly get the redemption that he deserved. Um and then the further, I guess, conclusion of them uh in The Revenant's Dream, that little like short story was just absolutely beautiful because it was such an emotionally satisfying send off to the extremely fucked up relationship that both characters have. And this is, of course, including within the context of the fact that, like, Door 3 Jacopo is like a reincarnation of his past self, and the white haired girl represented a part of Morgana's personality split. Um, and the way that all happened, and the way that Dreams of the Revenants like concluded their extremely fucked up relationship with a fantastic, emotionally satisfying close to both of them, was incredible. Um, and that's why it's one of the best dynamics in fiction to me, because it's like two extremely fucked up people are who fuck each other up, um, and then manage to somehow find a ending together that is still kind of fucked up. And just the sheer brilliancy of the storytelling amidst with all that is why it's one of my favorite dynamics in fiction. Number four, which is also a romantic relationship, but a much more wholesome one, is Mikkel and Giselle. Although this one is a bit deeper than just a romantic relationship, because this includes like every interaction that you playing as Mikkel have with the maid before you know that she is Giselle and you are Mikkel. And to like obviously their romance and the entire story of them in Door 5, um and the lengths that they go through to meet each other again is just so beautiful beyond word. It is my favorite romantic relationship in fiction, and it's not even close. Um, then there is the added depth of the fact that you consider that element with every interaction that you have playing as Mikkel with with the maid before you know that she is Giselle, and it just makes for like just so many layers of tragic heartbreak onto every interaction that you think back on, which already those interactions are just really, really fucking interesting to begin with. And it's like what really pulled you into the mystery of the house in Fata Morgana. And then like you have those layers on, and it causes like when you're playing this visual novel to think back in retrospect of everything that you've already experienced, and it's put in this new context, which just makes it so much better. And personally, the reason why I have this above Jacopo and Morgana, even though um these two dynamics do possess a lot of similar qualities, such as being like sort of fucked up relationships, although Jacopo and Morgana is exponentially more fucked up than Mikkel and Giselle is. Uh um the reason I like Mikkel and Giselle as a dynamic overall a little bit better is just because I like the two of them as characters better, primarily is what it comes down to. At number three is Henna and Johan from Monster. Um, this is undoubtedly the thing that Monster as a series is most famous for. Um, and it might be the most famous thing that Naoki Urasawa is known for in terms of pure character dynamics is the dynamic between Johan and Tenma. This is like many other examples on this list where a villain fundamentally affects a protagonist throughout the entirety of the story, from the very beginning when Tenma saves Johan's life to it to it being he tries to find to where Johan, the whole point of his character um I'm just looking because I have a poster of Johan and his quote saying the only thing all humans are equal in is death. Uh um and uh I couldn't help myself at looking at that because it's like the thing that fundamentally defines Johan's character, because he was not supposed to live, he felt like, and so he was constantly looking for ways to die. And the ironic thing about this dynamic is that Tenma is never able to kill him. He keeps trying, but he either keeps missing the chance or he was never able to take the shot in the first place. Um, and And this is just like so brilliantly concluded at the end of the series when Johann is revealed that like his name wasn't actually Johann and he doesn't remember what his name is, and this concept of Johann Liebert, this monster that Henry was trying to chase after, was really just, it didn't really seem to exist. At least it wasn't an idea that couldn't be tied down to one person. And the way that this ties into the overall themes of the fact that everyone has a monster inside them is just fucking brilliant. And I don't think that there is a dynamic that better encapsulates the themes of a story than Tenma and Johan do in the story of Monster. And that's why it's number 3 on this list. And number 2 is Guts and Griffith from Berserk. This was my previous number 1 spot. Um, you may know what the number 1 spot is. I've mentioned it in a few videos now, but if not, then we'll get there in a minute. For now, um, this was number 1. Is now number 2. And the and I there's not a whole lot I can really say about this that I haven't already said in previous videos, or that a ton of people have probably said better than me. But um I mean, this dynamic is just peak because it like features such a ridiculous amount of, like, this one is interesting because it's not so much a prioritization of villain affecting protagonist or protagonist affecting villain. It is like pretty perfectly equal levels, I would say. And that's what makes this dynamic really stand out to me, and the reason why it's ranked higher than everything else on this list, aside from the number 1 spot. Um uh sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Um, is because like um the reason why it's ranked higher than everything else on this list except for the number 1 spot is because like everything Guts does inadvertently affects how Griffith changes as a person. And as a result, Griffith Griffith as a person changing and his image changing fundamentally affects Guts's change in attitude uh, toward toward Griffith and the other characters and the world around himself. And just this fundamental loop that keeps building up until it literally explodes, which is the eclipse. That is the sort of explosion point of this funnel that keeps building up throughout the entirety of the Golden Age arc. Um, yeah. And honestly, that's like, you know, I feel like that's the best I could probably say. I probably like repeated a bunch of things I've already said before, but like this is like possibly the most famous dynamic in uh manga or at least one of the most famous dynamics in all of manga. So I feel like it kind of speaks for itself a little bit. And number one is Hannibal and Will Graham. Uh, so I'm gonna be completely honest with you here. Um, I did briefly consider, and I absolutely could have, because I think that Hannibal has the best main cast in fiction between Jack Crawford, Will Graham, and Hannibal Lecter. I think that the trio of them, especially with Jack as a tritagonist, just make for the best main cast in all of fiction, not even close. And I very easily, and I did consider for a little while making the top three spots Hannibal and Will and Jack and Hannibal. I seriously did consider doing that, and I very easily could have done so uh, for a list like this. The reason why I didn't is because of a few reasons. Number one, and the main reason I didn't do it is because it would have felt kind of cheap, and I wanted to include, a sort of larger variety of dynamics in three from the same series between the three same characters. Um, uh, but another reason is that as absolutely peak as the dynamics between Jack and Will are as the god and devil figures, and um and Jack and Will are as the god and his lamb, um I think that Hannibal and Will have the best dynamic out of those three options. Um, by a pretty large margin, which is another main reason I decided to not include the other two on this list. Um, Now I've talked about this plenty in videos. Um, I'm pretty sure I talked about it quite at length in the um in my villains video when I talked about Hannibal being my favorite villain in fiction. Um, like the entirety of Hannibal as a story is literally built around the relationship that the two of them have and the way that they constantly psychoanalyze each other and and just create such an insanely complicated relationship with so many different facets that just seem to expand to so many different side characters in the story. Um, and that's why it's peaked to me. Like this is another one which I feel like I just can't really say that many new and original words about because I've already talked about it a lot. Um, Mostly in my original Hannibal video. Uh, but yeah, that concludes my updated list of my top 10 favorite dynamics in fiction. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all later. Bye bye.